Today on the Bearded Gents Present, we're going to talk about Forgotten Worlds. This is a port of a Capcom arcade game. This is the Sega Genesis version. They also made a version for the TurboGrafx and the Sega Master System. Capcom also released several ports for this game besides the Sega Genesis one. There were versions for the Atari ST, Amiga, Commodore 64, and the ZX Spectrum. And there were also a few IBM PC ports of this game made. Capcom also released several ports for this game besides the Sega Genesis one. There were versions for the Atari ST, Amiga, Commodore 64, and the ZX Spectrum. And there were also a few IBM PC ports of this game made. The Sega Genesis version has a slightly different mechanic for the co-op play. Both players in this version are equipped with the long-range rifle. In the arcade version, one player has a long-range rifle and the second player has a shorter range spread shot or wide shot weapon. So they did change a little bit from the arcade to the home port. In the Sega Genesis version, there's also a setting in the options to turn on automatic fire, so you can just control the rotation of your character instead of shooting and rotating, because you have to use 3 buttons on the controller. You have a fire button, and then you can rotate to the left, rotate to the right with the other 2 buttons. There are other differences with the home versions versus the arcade. The arcade consisted of 5 stages and 8 bosses, where the home ports consisted of 4 levels, the first 3 being the same as the arcade, and then a final level that is an abridged version of the final level of the arcade. Let's take a few moments to talk about the manual. This game actually does have a very nice manual that comes with it. Gives you important things in here like starting up and getting ready to play the game. Look at that. 2 pages of story. When do you get that in a modern game? You know, you're lucky to get a manual at all. Usually just a link to a website on where you can download the manual or read it online, which, you know, what good does that do you? And that's why I like the retro games, because you get all these little bits and details in here that are, a lot of it's just filler, but you know, it's still pretty cool. It gives you something to look through, especially when I was a kid. My fondest memory is going to Toys R Us, Kmart, picking up a game, getting in the car, opening it up, get it right out of that shrink wrap, and pull out the manual, and I can read that on the way home and get all excited to play it. This brings back a lot of memories, just thumbing through these manuals. And you also can see there's a store that will show up. There's these little blue icons called Zenny. That's your money in the game. So you want to keep an eye on that, get all that as you can, because there's some very, very helpful items in here. And it gives you a pretty good description in the booklet here on all those. Because you get these assists called satellites that are very, very helpful. And this game really does shine in the 2-player mode, mainly because it keeps it fun. You can master it with a buddy, but if you die, you can press start and come back indefinitely. The only way your game is over is if you both happen to die at the same time. Your score does reset to 0 if you continue, but you keep all your money, which is the most important part, because that's what you really need. And you got a description here on some of the levels, screenshots, and description for everything. A little teaser for what you expect at the end, because that's the end of the war. Your scoring, and then there's actually a bonus score in here that's kind of cool. It's basically like a time attack. It doesn't display on screen, as you can see here in the description for the bonus score. Is there actually is an invisible counter, timer that runs throughout the entire level in the game. And if you can, and the faster you get to the level, the higher your bonus scores will be. So it's really good for challenges and time attacks and speed runs, because the faster you do it, the more money and points you can get. So if you really want to boost your highest score for bragging rights, that's a nice feature. Or you can play it at your leisure, go through it, enjoy the game with a friend, or you're by yourself, and never even worry about that mode. And like I said in previous videos, one of my favorite parts here, there's survival tips. That always brings back some memories. And, very important information here on handling your cartridge, because you don't want to mishandle that. I wonder if the warranty information still is valid. Oh, no, this game came out in '88, so I'm pretty sure that it's out of warranty. You get a pretty good description on the back of the box, screenshots, glimpses of the cutscenes, because there are a couple in this game, so that makes it pretty interesting to play through, adds to the fun. It shows you what the blast processing of a Sega Genesis can do. Like I mentioned previous in this video, this is the only version of the game that does allow you to play it with 2 players. You can't do that on Nintendo, but the TurboGrafx 16 version, which is on their CD system, you can't do 2 players. You can select either player 1 or player 2. As you can see here right in the description, you are called the Nameless One, or in co-op the Nameless Ones, and your name is never ever mentioned. In the TurboGrafx 16 version, you can play either as the player 1 character or the player 2 character, which is blue or red, but you do keep your weapon set from the original arcade version. So one has a spread shot with a little shorter range, and the other one has a long range automatic rifle. You get a little different play style with the TurboGrafx version, but you cannot play 2 players. The Genesis one allows you to play 2 players, but you just get to use the automatic rifle. So, like I said, there are a few differences between the versions, but the Sega Genesis one seems to be the better port to get, because of the fact that you can play it 2 players. This version of the game is also available on the Virtual Console. And if you are looking to play the original arcade version, you can find it on Capcom Classic Collection Volume 1 for the Xbox and PS2. And then on the PSP, it can also be found on the PSP on the Capcom Classic Collection Remix. But on the PS2 and Xbox versions of the game, you can control the aim of your character with the right analog stick instead of using button presses in the Mega Drive version, or the Sega Genesis version, depending what you prefer. This version of the game is also available on the Virtual Console. And if you are looking to play the original arcade version, you can find it on Capcom Classic Collection Volume 1 for the Xbox and PS2. It can also be found on the PSP on the Capcom Classic Collection Remix. But on the PS2 and Xbox versions of the game, you can control the aim of your character with the right analog stick instead of using button presses in the Mega Drive version, or the Sega Genesis version, depending what you prefer. In Forgotten Worlds, the characters you play as may not have names given to them, but they do show up in other franchises as guest appearances. As for example, in Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes, one of the helper characters that you can get is the Unknown Soldier, which is the player 1 from Forgotten Worlds. And both the soldiers end up in Namco x Capcom. And then the SNK vs. Capcom Card Fighters from the Neo Geo Pocket Color. And the War God appears in Guy's Ending in Capcom Fighting Jam. Alright, so I have my retro home improvement freezer mug full of ice cold frothy beverage. Now we're ready to play some Forgotten Worlds. So here we go. We're going to start the game now. We got this cutscene here. It's pretty cool. Yeah, see those blue things there? That's what you want, because that will give you your power-ups when you get to the shop. And here's the shop. You can buy items like health, auto tracking, armor, resurrection potions are always good. We should get one of those. Let's see. I don't think we can buy anything else but life. And it all goes up in price once you buy something too, so have to keep that in mind. And I want to die soon. Well, that's up to the first boss. And like I said, this game really shines when you play in co-op. But I don't have the other bigger gent today, so that's as far as we're going to get this time around.